Hello and welcome to another video here on TCGplayer.com. My name is Steve Rubin. This week we're going to be playing Blue-Green Crush in Standard. Now this is a deck that I know that Standard is kind of stale right now. There aren't that many tournaments and we have the new set coming out soon. But I've been preparing for the World Championships, and in my preparation I saw that Blue-Green Crush recently in Grand Prix Seattle. Oh no, sorry, Grand Prix Portland. Came in 9th place with an X2-1 record, so that's pretty much the basis of this deck. And then the next week at the Star City Games Invitational, two different Blue-Green Crush decks actually went 7-1, which was interesting to me because I thought that, you know, for my Worlds testing, this could potentially be a breakout deck. You know, last year it was at Worlds, like Jeskai with Jace was kind of like the new thing that was coming out that people didn't really know about at Worlds. This year I'm hoping it's Blue-Green Crush. And let's go ahead and get into the deck tech. So we start with 24 lands, and which is a bit few for a ramp deck, but you have a lot of other cards that are virtual lands. So we're playing 9 basic forests, and I believe in this build I have 7 basic islands to go along with 4 lumbering falls, a Yavimaya Coast, and then 2 Mirror Pool and a waste. So pretty straightforward mana base until you get to these waste colored cards. The mirror pools do make the it's go big or go home, I guess, at Worlds, and I think that these make the deck a little bit inconsistent. You have hands where you need colored sources, and you're kind of light on colored sources. I mean, once you resolve a Pilgrimage, Explosive Vegetation, or Nissa's Renewal, you have them. But essentially, the mirror pool is there to, you know, either copy your Part the Water Veil, or sometimes copy a creature like your Octopus Token, or even I've won games off copying Sylvan Advocate. So it's a really huge payoff later on in the game, assuming it doesn't hurt your mana. So, and then obviously we have the Lumbering Falls, which, you know, pretty standard in a deck like this. So let's go ahead and look at the spells here. We have a Traverse of Uvalor for Anticipate. Anticipate is really strong because it increases the amount of games that we, you know, hit Pilgrimage and Explosive Vegetation on turns 3 and 4, because essentially we're a ramp deck. We want to get as much mana into play as possible, and it also is a cheap way of triggering our Crush of Tentacles. So on 7 mana, you can anticipate into Crush or land, play it, and then play the Crush, getting an 8/8 and bouncing everything. So it just, you know, it's just a filler card. Like, it looks like a card that isn't really great, but it's been performing pretty well. Helps you find cards you need. 3 Den Protectors. A lot of these lists play 4, but I found that with the existence of Spell Queller and just having that many Den Protectors, like, you usually don't want to draw more than 1. They're very bad in the early game, so we're going to go with 3 Den Protectors and 3 Sylvan Advocate. I've really worked hard to make this list good. This video is coming out, I believe, on Friday, which means I've already have played, hopefully submitted this deck and played a list close to this in Worlds, but I'm just going to go say that it's much different than the other blue-green lists I've saw, and I pretty much put my heart and soul into this deck. So hopefully I can do it some justice here in this video. And we're playing Advocates instead of Eldritch Visionaries. Now, most of these decks play Eldritch Visionary because of the synergy with Crush. But I like Advocate because when you play against decks like Bant Company, you really need cards that can block. And in this deck with Pilgrimage and Explosive Vegetation, you often on turn 4 or 5 will have a 4/5 Advocate. And the other thing that Advocate does is when you're comboing off with parts, it's much easier to kill your opponent, especially if you can soften them up, because it'll make the Awakened lands bigger, and it'll make our Lumbering Falls bigger. And, you know, if we hit them a couple times with it, might be at 14, they might be at 12. It's very helpful. So the Advocates are just sort of cheap, efficient threats. Not Visionaries, because I just think they're too weak against. They died to Liliana, and they're just really, really weak against Bant Company, which is pretty much my priority going to Worlds. I think there's going to be, let's see how right I am with the metagame, because this is the day after, but I think that about half the field is going to be playing Emrakul decks, and then about a quarter to a third of the field is going to be playing Bant Company, and then the rest are going to be playing maybe like, you know, control decks or blue-red burn decks. But that's just a rough estimate, obviously. But anyway, moving on, we have Princess Pilgrimage. Deck wouldn't exist without it. You really need a 3-mana spell. And like I said, you only have 24 lands. So actually, Gutting the Spell Mastery and I missed Send to Sleep. It's just a 1-up to help you not die to Deep Fiends and Bant Company. For Nissa's Pilgrimage, you know, the deck runs through this card. It gives you your land drops, because as you're taking extra turns, you really want to have land drops. So the Nissa's Pilgrimages are great to have. Pieces of the Puzzle. Pieces of the Puzzle is interesting. there are two different lists. There's the Cody list from GP Portland, which I will probably link in my article. And he doesn't play pieces. He plays more of a control-y build with less combo, with more send to sleeps and no Emrakul. I found the pieces is really nice because not only does it feed like the Traverse to Emrakul engine, but it just, you don't fizzle as much. And what happens is, yeah, you only have about a little under half your deck are spells, but in the late game, after you've cast Pilgrimage, Vegetation, and Nissa's Renewal, these get really, really good because you've taken so many lands out of your deck, and very often you just go off by playing a pieces, you hit like a Part the Water Veil and a Crush or an Anticipate, and you go off from there. So I really like the pieces. I think 4 is too many because it's just too slow, too clunky. I'm instead of one essentially playing a Nissa because you need some number of cards, and this version plays 4 parts. You need some number of cards that when you're just taking extra turns, which happens a lot, hopefully it'll happen in this video where you're just not awakening, you just play this for 6 to get an extra land drop, get a bit of tempo. It's nice to have a Planeswalker because that'll give you a renewable resource, and it's like our 5th Pilgrimage because it just helps us hit our land drops, which is nice. Then the Vegetations, obvious include here. Jace is interesting. I was having trouble beating Emrakul, and I just wanted more things to have. When they Emrakul you, they can't like just blow you out. And Jace is one of those things, right? They can play Jace, bounce one of the other creatures, but then on my extra turn, I can still bounce their creature. I can draw cards to hit apart. And the other thing that Jace does, it gives us, it seems ridiculous, but a lot of things are going on here. Like Jace gives us a bit more Delirium for our Emrakul and our Traverse. And it also provides us with a body that is just going to, not a body, sorry, a renewable effect during part. So if you can ever Jace, you can really start chaining extra turns and winning games like that. So it's good against Emrakul, it's good with part, it's good in the deck. Obviously 3 Crush. Most of these decks play 4, but I was having trouble where I just had so many Den Protectors and Crutches in my hand. The extra copies were redundant, and I just needed to play more Magic, which is why I have, you know, the split of cards that I have. Obviously I'm a combo deck, but I'm not relying, like I have the pieces to find the Crush. I'm not really, multiple Crushes are bad in a lot of matchups, so we're just playing 3. I mean, it could be wrong, but anyway, 4 Part the Water Veils. This is how the deck works. You know, I'm going to take extra turns. Eventually, I'm going to try to set up Mirror Pool plus Part, or just, a lot of the times, you just have random Den Protectors Advocates, like Part kicked, plus another Part, or like a creature, you know, is just going to finish my opponent off, like with the Lumbering Falls. 2 Nissa's Renewal, really important. A lot of matchups, you know, like Blue-Red Burn and Bant. Once you resolve this, it's a game changer. If you can't, you know, you gain 7 life, and then you just have so much mana for the rest of the game. Uvenvald Hydra is actually, I might not be playing it at Worlds, but I just want to try it out. I just 5-0'd a daily before recording this video. Same list minus the Hydra, but I just want to try it out because I played against a green-red ramp deck that played it, and it's actually pretty good with Crush. Extra lands, and then you just kill your opponent with the Part the Water Veil. It's really big. Take an extra turn, swing again. Then Emrakul, this is the real big breakthrough that I think that I discovered in testing, is that I was playing a lot of games against other Emrakul decks where I drew a lot of cards, I played Part, I played Crush, I played everything, but they would just Emrakul me, and then I would lose, which is part of the reason I added Jace. But also I figured, you know, we're putting I'm not a Delirium deck. Emrakul is going to cost usually 11, sometimes if I'm lucky 10 or 9. If I'm really lucky 8. And I was just losing to these Emrakuls, and it's like, well, if I could just play an Emrakul, I could probably pretty easily carry that to victory. And I'm casting it for 11, but I have so much ramp. We have Explosive Vegetation, we have Nissa's Renewal that put tons of lands in play. So I think it's actually reasonable, and it's been really good because I really wanted to, I like the Traverse too, because with Pieces of the Puzzle, you know, it makes your Pieces of the Puzzle hit Traverse. Traverse is also, as you'll see, with these waste mana, like sometimes the mana is awkward, so being able to fetch up additional islands or forests if needed is really good. And that's pretty much it for the main deck. A lot of stuff going on here, so I hope I explained it pretty well. Moving on to the sideboard, we have 2 Dispels, which are mainly for Bant Company. Being able to counter their counter spells is nice, and being able to hit a Coco is really good. The unfortunate part about this deck is right now, it's kind of weird. On Magic Online, I've won 6 out of my 10 matches against Bant, but I've played some more on Cockatrice against some friends, and the matchup is pretty close to 50-50, but I think it's bad for me because it's just so hard to beat Spell Queller. It's just so hard to beat 2-drop, 3-drop Coco for this deck anyway. which is kind of a liability, but you still can beat it, and Dispel helps you do that. Negate is for any kind of other ramp deck, combo deck. It's kind of narrow, but I like having cheap counters with the Den Protectors for post-board games. Void Shatter has actually been great. Summary Dismissal is like gets the Emrakul's and everything, but just being one less mana can be relevant. So the split between Summary Dismissals and Void Shatter. Summary Dismissal obviously just against other Emrakul decks. Void Shatter is like Summary Dismissal, but, you know, doesn't exile effects, can still counter Deep Fiends, can still counter, you know, opposing Emrakuls without exiling the trigger. Sphinx of the Final Word is just against Bant. It's actually pretty nice. You can play this, they can't counter it, and then they can't Reflector Mage it, and none of their creatures attack through it. So getting the 7 mana can be difficult, but when you resolve this, the game is much different because they can't really attack profitably into this without throwing creatures away. And this also reads instant sorceries you control can't be countered by spells or abilities. So once you resolve this, your parts, your crushes, your Nissa's renewals are all going to resolve. And it's kind of wombo, but it comes up a lot in these games, is you have Mirror Pool, and Sphinx is actually not a legend. So I've had many games where I play the Sphinx, and then it's untargetable, so it's hard to use Mirror Pool against Bants because if you try to fork a spell, they can counter the original copy in response, or if you try to like copy an Advocate, they can Reflector Mage, you know, Coco and Reflector Mage in response, but they can't do that with Sphinx. So lots of times we go Sphinx, Mirror Pool, copy it. That's pretty much game. 2 Death Mist Raptors. These are against really aggressive decks like humans, decks like Blue-Red Thing, just to have more threats, and also good against control decks. With Pieces of the Puzzle is actually quite nice. You can mill it, get it back with Den Protector. Death Mist Raptor just helps us block against like green-black Delirium, and it's really good against Elder Deep Fiend because normally they side out their Kozilek's Returns against us. So yeah, they can like tap it down, but usually they're gonna be tapping your lands down. So if you can get a Death Mist Raptor in play, that buys you a ton of time. Comes back later against control, it's a nightmare for them. It's been solid but not great. Jaddy Offshoot is key to beat Blue-Red. And actually, I have a... you would look at this deck and you would think that the Blue-Red matchup is bad, but I have not lost to a single Blue-Red or Black-Red deck. And part of the reason is the 4 Jaddy Offshoots. I don't think many people will play them at Worlds, but they're just so effective that I have to play them. Because what happens is you play the Jaddies, you know, you gain some life. If they throw Burn at them, all of a sudden you're taking extra turns, you're playing Crush and whatnot. Aerial Volley is just against Bants. You know, we have tons of expensive spells. So essentially our sideboard plan is to bring in a lot of these 1-mana spells just to try to keep up. It's not great, but it's not bad either. And there will be a lot of games that you can win off of just Aerial Volley where they tag your Nissa's Pilgrimage or your Explosive Vegetation. They spend 3 mana, and I can actually get mana back by volleying the Spell Queller. And last card, Orbs of Warding. A hedge against Blue-Red and other burn decks, but also very effective against most of the Delirium decks because the way they attack you is through Transgress and Duress, and then eventually playing an Emrakul. If you have Hexproof, Emrakul can't actually... It sounds absurd to play a 5-mana, like, quote-unquote, do-nothing, but if you can play this, they can no longer pick the brain you, they can no longer transgress you, and they can no longer take your turn with Emrakul. Usually if they just go for 13-13, you have many ways of beating that. Play a Crush, playing other things. So Orbs of Warding, very, very good in those matchups. Even though it's kind of looks like a brick, it's pretty good. And that is the deck tech. Hopefully I'm playing this at Worlds. Hopefully I'm crushing. I crushed the standard portion. I'm pretty confident that my deck is good. Like, it's not great against Bants. You can never beat humans, but I'll be surprised if a single player plays humans. So anyway, that's the deck, and thank you for tuning in, of course. My name's Steve Rubin, and I'll see you guys for round 1.